You're listening to Electrician Live with your host, Paul Abernathy. Well, hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Electrician Live. My name is Paul Abernathy, your host as always. And before we get started, it is a call-in show, so if you'd like to call in, the number is scrolling across the top. Feel free to come in and we will patch you in. So tonight's topic, again, well, first I should say, thanks everybody for taking the time out of your day. And I know I look like I have a tan. I didn't adjust it very well prior to the show. Sorry about that. But thank you for joining us. As you've probably seen, there's a lot of things that are going on through the week here at Electrician Live, as well as Electrical Code Academy. You probably are reading up on all of the posts and the tweets that we've done. A lot of great things are happening here. So we thank you for joining us. One of the things to kind of let you know about is our weekly chat. It used to be open every Wednesday night, but now it's closing only to our subscribers that are in the mid-tier, as well as our fast-track students. Our exam prep is closing the door to that. So we still have some public stuff, but again, the weekly thing is going to be only for the fast-track students, as well as the mid-level supporters in our YouTube channel going forward. Doesn't mean we're not going to have other shows, because we are. Just those are going to be dedicated just to the students who are trying to learn the National Electrical Code, so that I can spend more dedicated time with the students and with people that are interested in learning the code. Now, another thing you notice, people have asked how they can donate to us and support all the stuff so we can keep making the free stuff as well. Well, we have a new way to do it on our website. If you go to masterthenec.com, at the bottom, you'll see that we have a new mini screwdriver that has a bunch of different bits in it. You can support us that way, and of course we'll send you one of those, the official Electrical Code Academy Incorporated mini screwdriver, as a thank you for your donation. That's just another way. People ask how they can support the programs and help subsidize it. Then that's one way to do it. Other than that, we have some new stuff coming out for the paid members over on the YouTube channel. We're going to have the update, the next edition of the Pool and Spa video series is coming out again, and we have had an update to the 2020 NEC that just came out. So as far as the video goes, we're ending up on 210. We're finally done with 210, so go check that out if you remember. So thanks for coming to Electrician Live. We do this every week at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time, so make sure you join us for that. All right, so tonight's episode is dealing with the phenomena called phantom voltage, stray voltage, spooky voltage. Been called many names. It has fooled many apprentice as well as a master through the years. So we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight. And I posted a video. I should mention, over on our podcast. Again, you can come over and join us over on the video stream over at our youtube.com/masterthenec. Or you can go over to electricianlive.com. Almost got choked up there over that. Kind of so emotional. So go over to electricianlive.com as well. You can actually watch it over there. But if you want to join in, kind of chime in to the group, then come on over to our YouTube channel and you can join everybody here and chime in during the actual show. Okay, so phantom voltage. So this is a case, if you've ever been in a situation where you have a circuit you're reading it, you know that you have one that's dead, it's not on, but it's maybe in a raceway with other circuits, or maybe it's a cable assembly that's being run in close proximity to another cable. One cable's energized and one is not, or it's disconnected. And you pick up some voltage and you're sitting there wondering, what is this voltage? Now we're going to talk about the situation that happens with open neutrals. We're going to talk about phantom voltage and keep it with phantom voltage tonight, okay? But again, a lot of times people can spend a lot of time really chasing down this ghost, and there's really nothing there. first thing I usually tell people when it comes to phantom voltage, and we'll look at a document here in a minute, but the first thing I tell people is if there's any load on it, then you realize real quickly that the voltage goes away. But it is a lot to do when you're reading it, if you're getting it, is the type of meter you're using. Okay, so we'll start out with that and kind of work our way around it, because this show, hopefully, will have some call-ins. Again, if you have some weird stories or something that you know of that's taken you a long time to figure it out, or you heard of an apprentice, actually the numbers across the top is a number you can call into, and I'll tell you when you can call in if you want to call in. Right now, we'll just kind of go through the stories a little bit. For the first story, I'll tell you, and then we'll talk about the different why you get phantom voltage. I guess it was back in probably 90, 91, 92. We had a situation of some phantom voltage or ghost voltage in an installation that I was working on, and I recognized it right away because it wasn't any, it wasn't open neutral, it wasn't anything like that was out of the normal, but we were seeing these voltage readings, and I knew right away just off experience what it was. But I had a helper, and a helper was just out of a apprenticeship, real gung-ho, great guy, and always positive. And so I noticed it on the meter, and so I asked him to check the circuit, and I gave him the voltmeter, which is a digital multimeter. It was a high impedance, a standard multimeter. And he was getting his voltages, and he was looking at it, and he said he knew the circuit, he had shut it off, and he was looking at it, yet it was, however the circuit was run, it was inducing voltage over on the disconnected conductors. And he was doing his darndest to run around. He would check, he'd go do this, he'd do that. And he could not figure out where this voltage, he could not remove it. And, when he would turn everything off, it would be gone. He'd turn everything back on, he would get the voltage. And he said, this circuit is disconnected. And he literally pulled it from the breaker and was still getting the voltage on it. And it was really just freaking him out. And so I kind of was busy doing something else, and it wasn't an overly busy day, so I didn't mind letting him stress it out a little bit. And so I literally was funny, and I kind of wish now I had recorded it, just to watch him back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And of course it was the stairs, so he had to go up and down, up and down, up and down. And I mean, I bet he wore out them stairs. I bet you if you were to measure the amount of wood on those stairs after his day, that he had worn it down, just up and down. And of course, I couldn't help but laugh every now and then, and he'd cut over and look at me, wondering whether or not he missed something funny, like I had some joke. And I had another guy that was with me as well, and I kind of told him what was going on. And we just watched him all day. So again, it was our humor for the day. And I think I have some call-ins, but it's a little early to call in. I'm not going to start on the calls yet. So, but anyway, that was the story, and we let the guy literally just work it out, back and forth, until finally he came to me. He says, Paul, I cannot figure out why I'm getting this voltage. I mean, the circuit is disconnected. I know nothing's plugged into it, and it was in a box with other circuits that were energized, but this one was not. And he was totally not understanding what it was, and so I ended up finally, but I did wait a couple hours, and finally got to him, and we had a discussion about phantom voltage, stray voltage, and again, as a different topic, but since I had that opportunity, I was going to talk about stray voltage, swimming pool applications. I just spent the whole day talking about voltages, the afternoon, talking about voltages, whether it was phantom voltage, ghost voltage, and then we kind of went into what stray voltage is and all this, and magnetic field. We went into a whole bunch of things on that day. But he finally walked away totally understanding what the issue was. Okay, so the problem was if he had grabbed a wiggy, which is a solenoid type of meter that actually would put load or allow load on the system, then what he would have seen is that would have caused the voltage to go away. And we did have a wiggy, but I wouldn't let him use it because when I was testing it with my digital multimeter, I handed it to him because I wanted to set the stage so he would use it rather than a Wiggy. And so I was the owner. I mean, he just took the multimeter from me and started testing it. Okay. And so, it consumed quite a bit of the morning and into the early afternoon. I didn't tell him during lunch, but then in the afternoon we had a little set down and we talked about all those type of things. So I did a video today, and it was a very short video, and I shared it on, I believe, my Instagram, and I shared it also on our Facebook page. And if you're not a member of our Facebook page, go join it, especially if you're preparing for an exam or you just want to join the Master the NEC one where you can post questions and code and things like that, or you're preparing for an exam. Check out Master the NEC Facebook page. So anyway, I posted this little video, and it's a short video, but again, what it was me just taking a 25-foot extension cord, 2 of them, rolling them up together, plugging one in, and then the other end of it plugging to a lamp, so give me some light. And then the other end was just the prongs, and the other end, the female end, was just there, not plugged into anything. And so I put the digital multimeter, which in this case, the Ames, it was testing with it, was a high impedance multimeter, like most of them are. And it was reading around 4 volts. Now you say 4 volts ain't much, but you got to remember, I'm just doing it at 25 feet and right there. So it was a crude test, but what it was showing you, the induced voltage from the extension cord with the power through it and the other one that's in close proximity. Now you have to remember that of this extension cord, probably they're not really that close, even though they're rolled together, depending on how the conductors are cabled in it. It probably is going to be a lot different if I were to run it inside of a metal raceway. Now, where we used to see most people get confused about phantom voltage, and we'll talk more detail about what it is, but what I used to see more people have problems with this is in industrial applications and commercial applications where the conductors in close proximity are being run in a raceway. And when they're running a raceway, of course, you have this expanding and collapsing magnetic field doing the AC, change in direction, 60 times a second. So what happens is it induces voltage on conductors that are in really close proximity. And when you go to read it, you're going to read this amount of voltage. Now, a lot of times people think if you read this voltage, you're not going to read any hertz, which should be around 60 hertz, 59 or some, give or take. But you do read hertz on most of them, even on the induced voltage. So you can't use that. So at the end of the day, what you have is a high impedance multimeter, and most of the multimeters are that way. But now, today, you can buy low impedance multimeters. Now, the high impedance on the multimeter is essentially in a circuit measuring it to protect the meter. And again, it's kind of like not taking any load into consideration and purely reading the circuit. But then you have what's called a low impedance setting, which is allowing it to be low impedance, which is allowing it to be able to read an actual load based on, low impedance, higher current, all those type of things. And the meter actually represents an actual load. And so what happens is when you apply load to phantom voltage, it goes away. So it's not a usable voltage. It's not something that we can utilize to do any actual work. Once you apply any load to this phantom voltage, it disappears. And so what happens is with the multimeters that have the low impedance setting, you flip it over to the low impedance setting, and all of a sudden you get a true reading value because it's a low impedance setting. So again, it's going to go away. So if you have a voltmeter, a digital multimeter that has a low impedance, then that's what you would use. Now, a couple things that I noticed during my test, and I have through the years, is we spend a lot of time relying on things like the voltage tickers that detect voltage. Now, the problem with those is that they can be activated as well when you're dealing with phantom voltage. And so I actually tested that today. Even though it was only 4 volts, it caused the detector to go off. And it was 2 different types that I tested. One was a very popular brand, and one was the one that's on the end of the Ames. And that was, again, phantom voltage. It can't do anything, but at the end of the day, it did cause you to reading to go off on the voltage detector. And at that point, you don't know what it is. So you always want to assume it's hot. You always want to assume that you're dealing with the live circuit. But again, it can cause you to start chasing your tail around all over the building and run into problems. And so that is never a good thing to do or run into. So you don't want to do it. And I was just checking real quick. And so, again, that's something that you definitely don't want to run into and not know how to address it. So a couple things that I test all the time with it is, again, so in phantom voltage, I've checked hertz before. So I've done the same test with that 4 volts, turned it over to the hertz, and I still got 59.96 right at 60 hertz. So it didn't affect it any, or didn't actually can use a meter that measures hertz and think that you can use that to detect whether or not there's any actual voltage there. But what I did notice is the moment that you applied any load, the phantom voltage just immediately goes away. And that's essentially what a low impedance meter is doing. It's replicating the application, applying a load, and then it just dissipates off and you get the actual true reading. So digital multimeters will throw you. Now, if you have an analog meter or if you had the Wiggy with the solenoid meter, they are going to give you true readings. Okay. Now, they're not as sophisticated. They don't have all the bells and whistles. But again, if you're old school electrician, you know that ain't nothing better than a good old Wiggy. And it can basically, when somebody's detecting that voltage and they're freaking out, then all of a sudden you can turn around and go to this and a Wiggy and boom, or if you have a low impedance meter that has a setting on it, then you can do that as well. Now, the high impedance meters that I have, the Flukes and the Ames, you just have to know what you're reading and the values you're reading to get an understanding of it. Okay. The other thing to do is I have always an applicator. Well, I used to have it, I don't anymore, but it's a little light that allows me to clamp on. It has insulated alligator clips that a lot of times back in the day, since we knew phantom voltage would die under a load, is that we would click onto it, we'd put a little lamp on it and it replicate a load, and all of a sudden the light wouldn't light up and we were detecting voltage, but we knew it wouldn't do anything. That told us it was phantom voltage, right? So if you think that you've got some readings and it looks like the readings are 30, 60, 80, and sometimes it can be close to as high, depending on how long the cable or conductors are and how close proximity, that, again, inside of a ferrous metal raceway, for example, it could magnify the effect and you could end up getting this induced voltage from the conductors that are connected to the conductor that's not. Now, I've been talking about this for years when it comes to MEG testing, when you're dealing with capacitance and you're in inductive coupling, because that's what I believe we're talking about here is inductive coupling, not necessarily a capacitance coupling. However, once you disconnect it, I believe there are capacitance that maintain a certain level of it inside the actual conductor until it dissipates. But the real issue here is through inductive coupling. So you've got the current that's running through the magnetic field, expanding, collapsing in one conductor, and it induces it over onto the other, and it's not even connected. So when you're doing MEG testing, for example, if you have something like that, typically you're hooking a megger up and you're sending a charge through it, and you're running it for 60 seconds, in some cases even 10 minutes, depending on whether you're doing a polarization index test, and it can induce a level of voltage over on a mutual conductor. So a lot of times you dissipate the one, but you don't think about the one you haven't tested yet, and you should always dissipate before you test the second conductor, and I don't think people do that all the time. We're always taught to go A to B, B to C, A to C, ground, but I don't think in the MEGs, they end up discharging themselves. But what about the mutual conductors that are in there? You have to think about discharging them really quickly, and it's a simple step, but it should be done, because sometimes you can get poor readings if you don't do that. But I have seen people chase that ghost all over the place when it comes to the phantom voltage. Now, interesting enough, I used to work for NEMA, and I guess quite a few years ago, NEMA put out a document from the manufacturers that tried to explain phantom voltage. So I figured we would check that out, and let's see if we can see what that looks like. So here's the bulletin. And as you can see, this bulletin is all the way, okay, now those over on the actual podcast, I'm going to read it to you. But those that have the stream or over here on our YouTube channel, you can see it on the screen, but I'm going to read it anyway. And it was put out in 1998. It was revised in 2003, and it was reaffirmed in 2011. Again, nothing's changed with phantom voltage. Now, NEMA put out this on behalf of the members, and it says, this bulletin is intended to address the occurrence of so-called phantom voltage, a phenomenon detected during the testing of electrical conductors in the field. It says, due to high impedance of measuring instruments, again, the high impedance meters is typically what we utilize when we're using a typical DMM. And so you can get them now, Fluke and a lot of FLIRs, and they will make a setting that is a low impedance setting. But typically all of your meters, even your older ones, are going to be high impedance. Okay? It says, a voltage reading may be detected on open conductors where there is no hard electrical connection to the voltage source. Okay? And it's kind of like the video that I did today where I actually had, bring me up here, where I actually had the extension cord on top of each other. One plugged in, one was not, and I was getting 4 volts. And again, this is just over a little 25 foot, and they weren't even probably really close together. They were probably still pretty far apart when you think of how the conductors are run inside the cable. So, extension cord. So, they're going to be much closer in a raceway where this can be more prominent. Okay, and it's going to be also something that's going to be more prominent inside of, let's say, a 14-3 or a 12-3, where you might get one conductor that's not connected on each end. Maybe it's the red, and all of a sudden you're getting this voltage, but it's not what you think it is, and you start to get all freaky on it and realize what is going on, and you start running around thinking this is loose or that's loose or whatnot. So if you haven't run into phantom voltage in your career, you will. It's just a matter of time. All right, now, it says conductors that are installed in close proximity to another one and are capacitively coupled to each other. Now, I'll argue whether or not capacity is the only thing going on here. It says, can cause this AC voltage reading. Such a reading could be 2 to 3 volts. In my case, it was 4 volts, and that was only on 25 feet. I have seen this voltage be much, much higher. Much higher, depending on the severity of the installation. Much higher than 2 to 3 volts. I believe that NEMA probably be better served to update this document. Now, it says, or it may be as high as the voltage on the adjacent conductors. Okay, well, they start with 2 to 3, but then they bring it back. Okay, so maybe they're okay. Just to reaffirm this thing. Okay, this is referred to as phantom voltage. According to Underwriter's Laboratory, this can be harmless reading and can be caused by the high input impedance of the measuring instrument, which places very little loading on the circuit under test. This is true. And it says the capacitance is increased as the length of run is increased. So I would have gotten more if my extension cords were much longer. Now, what's interesting is maybe I'm going to do a test. And this is funny. Maybe I'll take two reel, because obviously I have access to wire, right? Maybe I'm going to take 2 500-foot reels of, let's say, 12-2. Oh, no, that's not 12. Let's say 12 gauge, black and white. And I'm going to take them and connect them together for the entire 500 feet. So I have one big spool of a black and a white conductor right next to each other, parallel for the entire length. Then I'm going to apply some voltage to the black, and I bet that I get a very high reading, if not close to the reading on the white than I am the black. Probably going to get a pretty darn good reading, right? So, again, so that's what we're doing this. So now it says the capacitance is increased as the length of run is increased, okay? And I like to call this an induced voltage from one conductor to another conductor based on proximity to each other. It says a 50-foot run may produce a pronounced capacitance effect, whereas a 1-foot sample may not produce any. And as you saw today, if you watched my little video, I've got 4 volts, and they weren't even really close. It's just 2 extension cords laying on top of each other. And I was able to induce voltage over on the extension cord that isn't plugged into anything, okay? So, since the phantom voltage is a physical phenomenon involving very small values of capacitance, it cannot energize a load or cause physiological damage to a person, okay? It's harmless, but it does freak with your mind, okay? Now, it says care must be taken to be sure that the voltage reading is indeed phantom voltage, which is caused by improper use of a high impedance multimeter. Now, I'm not going to say it's an improper use. You're going to get this reading with the multimeter anyway, because it is based on high impedance. But if it has a low impedance setting, then you can turn it down and to the low impedance setting, and you should be able to totally mitigate the issues with the high impedance. Now, there's plenty of meters with this setting on it already. If you have a high impedance meter, then you just have to understand. And the easiest way to be able, if you're still old school and you have the meter, is go with the solenoid type like a Wiggy or an analog meter rather than a digital meter. Always have one handy. But the other thing you could do is actually try to, and I used to, like I said, I used to have one of those light bulbs, an actual light bulb with the little stems on it, the black and the white that we use for like temporary construction. And I put alligator clips on the end of it. And I used to put that on them, again, when I was testing it. And again, if it didn't light the lamp, then I knew that it was phantom voltage, even though I was getting voltage there. But it gets a lot. So you probably just could have easily just had a Wiggy or something else. And I always did have a Wiggy. So you remember when I was teasing my helper, we had a Wiggy. I just wouldn't let him use it because I gave him the digital multimeter right away because I wanted him to use that and think that I was, I wasn't like I was setting him up, but you know what I mean. Okay, now it says, and not as a result of a cable defect or improper installation, which may result in a shock. So you have to know that it's phantom voltage and always assume that it's hot. Now, like I said, the little voltage sniffers, the little tickers, they can be activated as well from this because it is voltage. It doesn't have any work to it. It doesn't have any ability to do anything, but it will cause those tickers to go off, okay? So you have to be aware of that. Now, in order to help minimize the likelihood of reaching a wrong conclusion from this phenomenon, NEMA recommends the use of a listed low impedance multimeter in place of a high impedance multimeter or other high impedance measuring device for testing on open conductors where there is no hard electrical connection without a low impedance measuring device. A high voltage reading is an inconclusive indication of possible faults in the cable. Okay, so this all comes from NEMA. I'll come back to me. So that's just a document that that was put out by NEMA, and it's been reaffirmed every couple years, and it gets reaffirmed again. The phenomenon doesn't go away, and it is why you read these things. Now, again, I saw a new meter, I don't know how new it is, that Fluke, and I'm not here to promote Fluke, but I'm saying they have meters, and I also saw one from, I want to think Sperry, or I can't remember the name, but they also, most all of them now will have a low impedance, a low Z setting on it. But again, I'm old school. I still use a high impedance, but I'm kind of familiar with what I'm looking at in the process of, oh, that's phantom voltage. I know what I'm dealing with, but I always make sure, okay, those type of things. So one of the way I know is if it's a circuit I'm dealing with and it's disconnected and it's in close proximity, maybe sharing a raceway with another, that I know that I could probably rest assured the values that I'm getting, that it's phantom voltage when I check all the others and everything's normal and then this one's not. But again, better safe than sorry, and I always carry an extra Wiggy with me. Now, if it's a known connected circuit, then high impedance meters are fine, okay? It's only when you know you've disconnected something and you start to scratch your head then that's when you want to say, okay, time out. This is probably phantom voltage. Now, the reason that you don't want to go all the way there yet, jump in deep, is because you could have an open neutral and you're reading that or something like that. So you have to do a little work. But again, it's not, if you've never run into this phantom voltage situation, then you will. It's a matter of time. Now, I used to run into them again the most when my brother were doing commercial applications in long raceways that had multiple branch circuits in the raceways. Then that's when we would have a circuit at the other end and we have it off and the circuits go to a junction box and then it breaks off and we were getting voltage there and we're going, wait a minute, that circuit's off. We know it's off. Okay. And it was, again, we kind of knew that it was phantom voltage. And by the way, that helper after a couple of years wasn't with me anymore because I would have kind of teased him. I know he didn't leave because of that. So he had an opportunity. Once he got his license, he went to work with his family because they owned electrical contracting. He wanted him to work with me for a couple of years. And I was happy with that and taught him everything that I could. And then he went on with his family and their electrical business. And he's doing great today. Still an electrician. In fact, a master now and doing wonderful. But he'll always remember that day where I just let him run around for about 4.5, 5 hours trying to find out why this circuit was like that. Okay. All right. So now if anybody has any, I have a couple other stories, but if anybody has any stories they want to call in and tell us about their experience, feel free to call in now. The number's on the line. If it for some reason doesn't go through, then just keep trying back and I'll get you connected. Sometimes this thing works and sometimes it doesn't. Yeah, there's all kinds of stories on this application. And again, the real issue is close proximity. So I've got the one conductor that has current running through it. It's some load. It's has the voltage. And then I have a close conductor that isn't connected. And I have what we call coupling effect that takes place. Not so different than what happens with the transformer. Again, I hesitate to go there, but again, there is a separation between the two, and the only reason that you're actually getting anything over onto that other conductor is because of the coupling effect that takes place. Okay, and so that's how we get it. But I mean, I have had my personal experiences also in some older homes, and where people were. Back in the day, they were doing a lot of cable bundling and then not necessarily following the code and getting readings when we have bundles of cables and having something that's disconnected. So let's see, we have a caller.
To accept, press 1. To send a voice.
Hey, caller, you're on the air.
Hey, how you doing?
All right, who are we talking to? Who are we talking to?
This is Xavier. Xavier, I had messaged earlier talking about the 90 volts of phantom voltage I dealt with yesterday.
Oh, okay. You just recently had an issue, just yesterday.
Just yesterday, I have a real estate friend of mine. He just got a whole acquired property and had some electricians rewire it. Actually, licensed electricians, and what was happening was the dishwasher receptacle was showing 90 volts. Actually 92 to be exact. I have a picture of it. So, he called me because they said they were going to have to tear down walls and all. And the other problems he had before, I dealt with him with minimum intrusive work on it. So, I got over there and I checked it with the meter. Yeah, 92 volts. That's what he told me. I plug in a lamp, I get nothing. No light. Regular incandescent bulb. I plug in another one. So, I should have checked it with the load. My thing was, I'm thinking, my first thought was a staple. I dealt with that back in 2005 to Katrina. Somebody rammed a staple halfway through 10 gauge Romex to sever one of the legs, and I was getting 110 on one leg and about 101 on the other.
Right.
But it couldn't even light up a light bulb that time it did. So
yeah, so the key here was in that last experience, it still was able to carry the load and light a lamp. But in this case, as I said, once you put load to phantom voltage, you're not going to get any light out of it. So you did the right thing right away, is plugging a lamp into the receptacle because it didn't work. So did that tell you right away it was phantom, or did you have to do some more?
Well, that didn't. I had my suspicions at that point. I had dealt with phantom bars in industrial setting. I mean, with the phantom voltage in industrial setting. So, never that high though, at 90 volts. But when it got me, it's Romex. It's a a dwelling. So family dwelling unit, and it's Romex, and I kind of thought that could be odd to get that on Romex. So, I kind of checked all the receptacles over down the countertop, and I was getting no voltage on the GFI. I pulled the GFI off. Well, the GFI was in its in the state, in the trip state, but it was reading the 90 voltage on there when I pulled it off on the back, so I couldn't get nothing to the front. So what happened was I noticed it had a red wire. There was a red wire coming through it, and this is all room. As I go to the panel, I take the cover off. There's no red wire. So immediately it got me thinking, what was the deal? So what was happening was, you mentioned something about seeing in the 12. It was a 12-3 wire. They ran. It was sharing neutral. They ran the black hot to the living room, and then this one went to the kitchen and to the dishwasher on the red side. So coming out the panel, I don't know why they did this, but they had two 12-gauge wires, each one having a separate breaker. They went into a little junction box in the attic, tied together. One neutral completely eliminated, and then it was a 12-3, and it split off. I don't know why, and what in the world they were thinking. Maybe they were going to do something different. I don't know, but that was the problem there. And without pulling walls, basically I pulled the receptacles, I tied the neutrals, and gave pigs on pigtails on all my neutrals, so no neutral could get separated. I went back and I moved the two breakers next to each other, and I put me in a double pole breaker.
Good.
The way it could trip, and I marked it as a multi-wire circuit. I think that was the biggest thing I could do for them without tearing any walls down. But yeah, that's what was called though, because the living room was getting that power off of the one leg of the 12-3, and the kitchen dishwasher was trying to get it off the red one, even though it was open at the time.
You probably describing what I would say most people would find as a phantom voltage situation is something like I was saying, a 12-3 or 14-3, where it's sharing a neutral, but you've got one circuit you think it's turned off. And again, you bring up a great point. There's other reasons why on multi-wire branch circuits we use 2-pole breakers or 2 single poles with identified handle ties. Because of this exact reason, if there was 2 singles in there, somebody turned off one, yet the other circuit was still energized. And as well as I do, you can get just as good a shock off a neutral as you can an ungrounded conductor. So it's a unsafe condition, and you were able to make it safe and make it right. I don't know why people keep cutting corners when doing the code is a minimum standard, and you made it safe. So that was awesome. But yeah, I can see where, if you didn't know all this, then somebody could start opening up walls, ripping things out, freaking out over it.
Yeah, and you're dealing, like you said, with that neutral, and just out of past experience, I got my best little zap off of a neutral, off that grounded conductor before. So I'm always careful to always treat those just as much as I treat the regular conductor. I'll treat my grounded conductor the same until I know otherwise. Until I know it's completely dead, it's going to be treated like it's a hot one, because, and in that case, like that, I mean, that's so easy to just go in there because the break is off. I could have pulled it off, touched it, fans running in the living room and all, taking that neutral, and bringing that load back on that neutral and getting a little ting, a little zap that I didn't need to get.
Yeah.
So, exactly right. But yeah, that was the best approach I could take to it. But there's one reason, I tell you what, in electrical field, I tell you, I always learn from my past experience, but when I look at something I think it's similar, I try not to focus. I don't focus my mind on that one last thing, because I know it could be something different. Because, I was thinking Romex safe for first. And that was my first thought in my mind. And I could have went with that thinking, hey, somebody stapled into the Romax because I've seen that on a dryer circuit. But I was getting like 112 off one side, and I was getting like 107 or 101 actually on the other leg. And when the walls were still down, so as I walked and traced 10 gauge wire, I seen that they clipped it with a staple. And in that case, when I put the lamp on one leg, it was bright. When I put the lamp on the other leg, it was bright for a second, then it would dim down.
All right, that's your neutral issue there. So you were able to. A lot of times, that's what we see when we have a load where the lamp is really, really, really bright on one. That tells us that it is an open neutral or a problematic neutral. And we see this a lot in recess cans that really burn really bright and eventually burn out. It's because there's a neutral connection issue. So, but in this case, would have been interesting is if you had to use the voltage ticker. People rely on those things. And again, I used to sell quite a few of them things, and I have them. But I mean, I am more than sure that ticker would have started just going off like crazy, even on your 90 volt phantom voltage issue. I bet it would have detected it as if it was voltage. Now, can you imagine if somebody didn't have your experience, an apprentice or a helper or somebody new in the trade? Can you charge the people? Can you charge the people for 3 or 4 hours of you running around and only to find out it's just phantom voltage? And boy, you're going to look embarrassed. Now, obviously, the customer's not going to know any different. But I mean, how do you charge somebody for 3 hours of you having to learn on the job? It's tough.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I tell you, and that's we talked about the meter. I'm in the habit of checking something with my meter. I also checked it with the ticker, and within that time, my ticker actually went off on it, like you said. And then when I'm really in doubt, I'm gonna put a lamp on it with a bulb I know.
Yeah.
And once I check it on that circuit, I'm going to another circuit to make sure it was still working. And that right there, out of those three things, I would usually have an absolute answer. But yeah, I mean, it could be because it's something scary. It would be at 90 volts, and I'm sitting there thinking, well, I don't want to just touch this.
Right. Right. I don't want to grab it. It says 90 volts on it.
Exactly. And without a proper procedure, you might sit there and spend a lot of time trying to figure out why it's there. I completely understand that. I mean, fortunately in this case, it took me only about 20 minutes to figure out what was going on. But I can see how it could easily take someone quite some time. Especially if they didn't have the concept of how it was working.
Right.
So yeah. I mean, I appreciate your show today, though. I mean, that's funny you mentioned this. I just dealt with it yesterday. That's a blessing.
Yeah. So one of our members that are in the video, Robbie, says, "Can I explain open neutral?" Basically, in a normal AC circuit, it changes directions 60 times a second, and in this concept, when you have an open neutral, it can't fluctuate back and forth. So what happens is that the voltage, it doesn't allow it for it to get accurate readings on the neutral because it's open. But in some cases, because of how you're doing a measurement, the actual voltage can be higher on the ungrounded conductor. And this is what causes a lot of the lamps to really, really get all of a sudden really bright before it burns out. And open neutrals, you just have to be, if you start noticing some funky voltages on the hot leg, and you're not getting any readings from the hot leg over to the neutral, but you get a reading from the hot leg over to an equipment ground, for example, then it can tell you that you have an open neutral. So I always tell people, again, check hot to neutral and then check hot to ground. And people say, why do I do that? Well, because back at the main panel, the grounds and the neutrals do come together on the same terminal bus, so you should be able to get the reading. And then you can tell if your reading on your neutral is a little messed up in your readings. So, but thanks, Xavier. Thanks for the story. Again, that could have turned into a nasty situation that ate up a lot of time, but it sounds like your experience kind of helped you know what it was right away.
Yeah, right away. Like you said, the industrial experience, I kind of, I was thinking phantom voltage, but being that high, like you said, 90 volts. But when you was reading that reading and you start out saying the 4 volts or whatever at first, I'm like, no way, no, go a little lot higher. And then you finish. I said, yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
That's the first time I've seen one that high.
Yeah, I mean, like my example today, that was just an extension cord, and they weren't really coupled close together. Unlike in your case, man, that's what was it? Did you say it was a 10-3 or a 12-3?
It was a 12-3.
Okay, 12-3. Yeah. Those conductors are running in close proximity for, a long length run. You don't know what the length would be. In a non-metallic sheath cable in a dwelling, going up and through studs and through top plates. And I mean, it could be 40, 50, 60, 75 feet overall. So again, close proximity. Now, if they were a little further apart, you might have less induced coupling effect. But those, because they're in the same cable and they're cabled together, they're plexed, then what happens is it's in extremely close proximity, and that's going to read, and that's why you're going to get a higher value. Now, if you did this in a Ferris raceway and you had a bunch of circuits inside of a raceway in industrial, and you're doing motors, and you got one of the legs undone, and then you're reading something, and you could totally freak out and getting such high voltages, and you're like, what is going on here? Because a lot of times they have larger raceways that are going to share multiple circuits. So it could really freak you out.
Exactly. So, when I thought about one of the things that I really considered about that high voltage, I was all the way on the other side of the house from the panel.
Mm-hmm.
I considered that I was testing on my grounded conductor right there by the load, next on the part of the load before I got back to the panel. I'm under pressure. If I was close to the panel, I may not have raised such a high voltage because that neutral load that was part of that neutral I was checking with was part of the load, of that 12-3. So, I think that could have contributed to that high voltage reading I was getting. Because I'm so far away from where the grounded conductor actually gets
the phantom voltage, the values that you're going to read are very indicative of length. The longer you go and the longer the close proximity takes place, the better chance you're going to get the higher readings. So yes, you probably might not get. Now, interesting enough, when I was testing my little extension cord today, I was testing the end that was close to the end that plugged into the receptacle, and I was still getting on either one of them, I was getting right about 4 volts, either end. So, on the cord. So, but it is true statement, if you were to test this system at 75 feet away, you would get possibly different values than you would get up close. But the issue is, it always seems to be the issue is at the load anyway, at the end where the switches are, where the receptacles are. But the first thing that you did that I tell people all the time, if it's in a receptacle you're getting this, plug a load in it and see if it lights the load. If it just the lamp, see if it lights the lamp. Like I said, I have my little lamp with my little leads with an alligator clips on them, insulated clips that I used to use when when we would get this at switch locations and things like this. I'd have the hot. I'd take the hot there, connect one over to the neutral, and I would see whether or not I'm getting anything. And it wouldn't light it up, then I wasn't getting it. Then I knew it was phantom voltage. But again, different ways to do it. Of course, the easiest way today is to have a setting on your meter that's just a low impedance setting, and then you don't have to worry about it. Or get you a Wiggy, a solenoid type meter or analog meter, and then they will work fine. It's the digital multimeters with the high impedance. They're the ones that detect this. So I don't want to throw all of them out with the bathwater, right? Because they still fine. As long as it's a system that you know the power's on and everything's connected and the breakers are on, they work fine. It's only when you have open connections that high impedance is not going to do you any favors, that type of thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, man.
I appreciate you.
Well, thank you for calling, man. I'm glad you could tell us your story. That sounds awesome. I'm glad you fixed it for them. That's the key. But I
and plus,
also like the fact that you fixed it and put the two-pole breaker on it, or again, since it's a multi-wire brand circuit, you were able to make it right, and that's something that needed to be done. A lot of people wouldn't make it right, and you made it right, so that's good.
yeah, the only thing I didn't like about it was having the kitchen and and the living room sharing that 12-3. But hey, I mean, I don't see a code violation. So the way it was done, not that I could think of. So I mean, the next thing could be done with tearing that wall. So
Yeah, so the only thing that would be code for that would be, for example, that now a multi-wire brand circuit is two circuits. It's sharing a neutral, but it qualifies as two separate branch circuits. One of them was doing the dishwasher, one is doing a living room. The only issue that you'd run into is somebody said, well, that dishwasher is designed to get a dedicated circuit. In reality, we could argue and say that it was a dedicated circuit because a multi-wire is two circuits. Still not the optimum way to run that circuit. So, but it is what it is. And in this case, I would have done the same thing you is. There's no way that I'm going to argue that it has to come out or be changed. It's already in there. It's technically two separate circuits. Just put it on a multi-wire, just put it on a two-pole breaker or two single poles with identified handle tie and make sure it's labeled properly and move on.
yeah, and that's what I did. So I'm glad you agree with me on that.
Yep. Yeah, no, man, Xavier, no, I don't agree. Go rip it all out. Open up the walls. Pull it all down. No, don't do that. It's all good.
I could more money in that case, but I like to keep my customers happy.
Yeah, I mean, we all have to live with our conscience too. It's two separate circuits, it's two separate overcurrent devices. Yeah, it's sharing neutral. Understanding how multi-wire branch circuits work, it should not, obviously not going to overload the neutral. So, it's going to work fine, and it is what it is. It's already in, so just go. You made it as safe as you can make it.
Yes, sir. All right. Well, thank you, Paul. I appreciate you having me on here.
Hey, man. Thank you for calling in. Call in anytime.
I will.
All right. Take care.
Have a night.
You too. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Xavier, thanks for calling in. That was awesome. So that was a great example of, and Xavier did the right things here. Okay. A lot of times we walk into these situations and we're just there as a service call. And theoretically, it's it's two branch circuits. And again, as long as it's on a two-pole breaker or two single pole with identified handle tie, what are you going to do? And again, we get these calls all the time, and you're not going to say, oh, well, you got to rip it all out. You're not, okay? Theoretically, whether something was right or wrong, it is safe as it's going to be if you protect it properly. And then it sounds like Xavier did the exact same thing that I would have done in that situation. There's no way I'm going to make the customer open up anything or even argue that he should open up anything. Okay? Not at all. Now, some people don't like shared neutrals. Code allows for it. Code compliant. Like it or not, is what it is. I ran myself quite a few of these common neutral circuits when we do bedrooms. I'd run a 14-3 to the back, and one would do one bedroom, one would do the other. The black would do that one, red would do that one. Shared a neutral, never had a problem. Code allows me to do it. It can be treated as a single branch circuit, or it can be treated as two branch circuits. Okay? All right. See if we have any questions that we have in the room. For those that are over on the podcast, again, thank y'all for listening on the podcast. Hopefully you check us out over on our video stream. Again, we do this every week. And then when you want to check what the topic is in advance, just go to electricianlive.com and it will have an update. Now, I have a special show coming for the July 4th edition. So again, it's probably not up there. But July 4th does fall on the day where we do Electrician Live. So I believe we're going to still have a show. It'll always be recorded, so you can watch it later. And if you're in the podcast, I again appreciate you listening to us over on Deezer, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Apple iTunes, whatever you call it, Google Play, all those type of platforms. I do appreciate you listening. All right, let's see what we've got here in the board. We've got Matthew says the first meter he ever owned was a solenoid type Wiggy. Absolutely. Me too, Matthew. I still own it. Still love it. It's simple, but I will say I only pull it out of the bag when I need it for if I'm detecting anything like dealing with a phantom voltage. Other than that, I always tell people, if you have a high resistance, remember, a key thing to remember, if you think you've got phantom voltage or something seems wonky, put it under load. And so if you're at a switch or even at a receptacle, even at the receptacle, you could take a lamp, and again, it has the two leads on it that I actually can plug into the receptacle, okay? And if it won't light the lamp, it's phantom voltage, okay? And it's just plain and simple. So kind of one of the ways that we would do it if you still have the high impedance meters. If not, get you a low impedance one that'll work fine. Again, the ones that I display, like the Ames, doesn't have that setting. But again, it's okay for me because, again, I still have a backup Wiggy. Now, anything else that I would do where power is always on and I know it's on and I'm just checking the voltage, then I'm not worrying about the value. I'm worrying about actually getting the voltage value. And so in that case, I don't mind using a digital multimeter because I can get those values out of it. Plus, I use it, clamp on amp probe and hertz measurements to make sure the hertz are right, which they should be anyway, but to test it. All those type of things. I love a digital multimeter. So again, one small benefit would be if it had a low impedance setting on it, but a lot of the meters you probably have today, the newer ones you get, are probably going to have that setting on it. Okay? So that was a lot of great information in this show. Let's see here. What is Robbie? Oh, let's see here. Jeff says, look up Ideal 61065. That is one I have. Okay. It's an Ideal meter. I assume that Jeff has a low impedance setting on it for this same situation. Robbie said, so an open neutral is dangerous because you could assume the circuit is off, but it really isn't. That is one of the issues with it, definitely. One thing to remember is that we can't switch a neutral. And you can't put fuses in neutrals. That's the general rule. So kind of one of those things that you could have a neutral that actually looks like it's dead and current could be, you could have the ability to have it carry a load up to the point where your neutral is lost. And so somebody thinks it's a neutral and comes in contact. So you always treat the neutral just like you would treat a hot. Okay? But you're going to get some weird readings if you have an open neutral. Okay? And so not the same readings, it's not the same characteristics you're going to get with the phantom voltage, because an open neutral could be not all the way broken, and you're still going to probably get some readings from, if you were to go from the ungrounded to the ground, or again, you might not get something if it's an open neutral from the hot over to the neutral, but you still have potential for a dangerous situation there, definitely with an open neutral. So again, one of the procedures that I go through if I thought it was an open neutral is I go right to the panel and I check all of my connections to make sure they're all properly done, everything's torqued fine. And then when I'm getting circuits that aren't working, but I know it's plugged in, the breakers and everything's working, then I start looking for where I might have an issue with an open neutral. But phantom voltage is a totally different thing, whereas we don't have any apparent issue in the circuits. We've disconnected the circuit, and it's not connected at each end, and we're still getting a voltage reading. That shouldn't happen. Obviously, it's not connected to a breaker, but it's getting this induced voltage, and again, it can't do any work. It's harmless, except it will play on the mind and make you think you have to do some other type of testing, and it could cause you to just run around. Okay? So that's why, again, have a Wiggy, have something solenoid based, analog type of meter. Save your digital multimeter for other readings. And for normal load testing, receptacle, power, it's fine. It's just when you know that you've disconnected something and you know you've turned it off and you're still getting a voltage reading, now you know why you're probably getting it. And there's a couple ways that we talked about to be able to test it, okay? An open neutral can be an open totally. And it could cause a circuit not to run at all because the neutral is loose. Or it could be a circuit that is loose neutrals and they're not making a really good connection and they're arcing. And so you'll get intermittent applications. All right. So you could get a circuit that functions, but the lights would go really, really bright and it would kind of tell you that something's going on with that connection. Okay, so just kind of something you have to investigate. Maybe we'll do a show all about open neutrals and all of the situations, everything that can happen with an open neutral. Maybe we'll do another show on that. But again, if I have a black and a white and the neutral is truly open, then the circuit's not going to complete. Okay, but that's not usually where we have the problems with the open neutrals. We usually have a problem with us calling them open neutrals, but it's just a poor connection neutral. That would be where we're getting some applications. And then under load, you can have arcing take place across a neutral that is broken only because it's indicative of a load that's being drawn. So you have no problem with it until you plug a load in. And then the load creates enough current draw that it causes it to arc over that gap. And so it sounds like it's a great show, and we need to do one on open neutrals and all of the issues with open neutrals. If that's what you folks want, let me know what you want to hear on future shows. Right here is the email address for those that are on the podcast. It's info at masterthenec.com. That's our website right there, masterthenec.com, .net or .org. It doesn't really matter. Go to any of those you want. And send us your feedback. Send us your topics for future shows. If you know somebody in an industry that you'd like to see on this show, maybe I'll get somebody in the PV industry on the show. People have been asking me for PV stuff, so maybe we got to do that. So anyway, that is it for tonight's show here at Electrician Live. I thought it was a great show about phantom voltage. Gave you some tips on how to detect it. Just be careful with it. And for those over in the podcast, we're going to end the podcast. For those over in the video stream, I'll hang around and answer a few more questions while we transition from the podcast over to the live stream. Okay, so just hang tight, those that are in the video, and we will pick it up here shortly. Oh, wrong one, right? You've been listening to Electrician Live with your host, Paul Abernathy. All right. Okay. So this we'll just stay on here for a few more minutes in case anybody in the live stream has any questions about anything that's been going on over on that I've been posting a lot of stuff in the last couple of days. Robbie, I saw you got the bundle, and again, it's have to wait to Cengage to get us the keys, and it's probably, and then I can plug my end of it in, so it'll probably be the first of the week. Obviously, they weren't open on Saturday and Sunday, and I believe my agent was out on Friday, so we'll get it to you. It can take up to 5 business days, so we'll get that to you as soon as we can. But thank you for getting the bundle. Other than that, you did notice that Wednesday nights, when we do our exam prep, is going to now be exclusive to the fast track students as well as those that are members of our YouTube channel in the electrician exam prep series level, which is the second tier level. Now the 2020 NEC series, you're still going to have access to all the 2020 stuff that we put up there, but you're not going to have access to the live streams each week because really 2020 series doesn't necessarily indicate that you're preparing for an exam. You're just wanting to learn the 2020 code. So if you're at the mid-level and higher, you're going to get access to the live stream every week, and it's going to start next week. And it starts at 7 p.m., and we're going to examine each week the Fast Tracks program and bring up questions and the competency reviews and exam questions and show you how to do a lot of the calculations. And you get to bring any questions that you have from the program to me personally, and we can solve them live right in class. And again, so hopefully some of our Fast Track students will join us, and some of our second tier and higher members over on our YouTube channel will all join us. So again, it allows me to dedicate more time to the students rather than the overall masses. It doesn't mean I'm going to stop doing videos on YouTube. Again, I have people that have been sending me emails all day today. I'm not stopping content. We're going to always have our podcasts up there because that's a second place that I store my podcasts. So again, sometimes when you see the black screen and people go, "Where's the video?" It's not video. It's a podcast. So it's just giving you another way to listen. That's all. So anyway, if we have any questions on anything tonight, any of the topics on the phantom voltage or anything like that, we will definitely cut it off tonight. Oh, I guess I should say this before I go. I didn't say it on the podcast. Moving forward, you probably saw the little screwdrivers we have. Each week that we do this, that we have the Electrician Live moving forward, and I guess we'll do it next week instead of this week, is that what we're going to do is we're going to have, and you donate during the stream using the super chat. It doesn't matter whether it's $1 or whatever it is. You'll be enrolled in a weekly drawing, and we will send you one of those mini screwdrivers with our name on it and everything as a thank you. So we're going to do that each week. It's a giveaway. And we're also going to, those are available for donation on our website as well. If you want to donate, people have been asking how they can donate to keep us doing the free streams and free stuff that we do as well. And that's how you can do that if you want. People ask all the time. Edgar, I'm not understanding here. You said only 200 characters. I'm not sure what you're referring to. There is nothing in the Fast Track program where you will ever need to put more than 200 characters in. Trust me. Ever. Never, ever need to. And I have a lot of students in the program, and you would never need to do it. In here, I have no idea what the limit is, but that if you're talking about characters here, that is that would be YouTube that would limit that, and I have no idea. I've never had anybody that needed to type something that long. So, especially here in this format. So, anyway, you can always email me. Any questions? Again, the email address is on the screen right here. And I don't control that, Edgar. So it's a YouTube thing. So my recommendation would be to type it up in a Word document, and then you can cut and paste pieces of it until you get your whole message. But we're not going to, this is a simple chat feature. I can't control the number of characters. You'd have to take that up with, YouTube. I don't control that. So anyway, yes, I am going to leave it uploaded. Caleb definitely can do it. You know, I leave those uploaded so somebody can always come behind me and go, "Hey, he didn't describe open neutrals properly." That wasn't the topic of tonight's show, so I tried to be as basic as I could with it. But phantom voltage was a topic, and I think we covered that pretty darn good. And don't worry, I always have my haters anyway who want to troll me, so it's all good. It's all good. Gotta love them. All right. That's it, folks. Hopefully you enjoyed tonight's episode of Electrician Live. Join us next week as we'll have a really good special episode. At least if everything falls into place like it's supposed to. Anyway, thank you, folks. Well, What is that, Edgar? I had a ventilation fan turning disconnected, producing over 300 volts. If depending on what the voltage was on it, that seems awful high. But again, I would have thought if I had it disconnected and I have a fan turning, sometimes it can create what's called a generating current, and so you get current because it's acting like a generator and it's kicking it back into the system. One of those things too. Yeah. So yeah, if you can get 3-phase, there you go. You can get some funky readings, and if that was phantom voltage, then it meant that circuit that was going to the fan had a lot of other circuits that were in a common raceway or something that was actually inducing that voltage. And yeah, that's a healthy amount of voltage. That will totally freak somebody out. Testing that and seeing 300 volts, and they'll be like, something's on. And then they'll think, well, I'm not getting 480, so one of the legs must be open or something must be open. And then they end up chasing this thing all around the building, right? Trying to find out why. So again, a lot of times you can have a motor that, again, the motor can turn around. And, I have a lot of people that ask me about fault current. I did an episode on fault current one time. And they're so worried about the fault current, they don't realize that even in motors in a building can contribute. So they would argue to me about disconnects outside having to have a rating on it. And I would tell them, so even when you turn it off or the building loses power, as those motors are winding down, they act as generators and they'll contribute back to the system. And you can create fault current. It can be just as dangerous. So until they wind all the way down. So they're acting as motors. And then when the power goes out, they're still going. So then they'll kick voltage and everything back on the system. They'll kick it all back and actually act like a generator. And, it's kind of one of those things. If you think about it, that's kind of how the generators work, right? So, excellent, Edgar. I can see where you'd get that on a 483-phase system where close proximity as conductors could most certainly do that. Definitely. All right, well, I'm going to leave it off for tonight, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed tonight's episode. So, again, hopefully you join us next week. I've enjoyed being with you, and hopefully you'll come to if you're in the Fast Tracks program or you're in the second level of our YouTube channel subscriber, then you should join us on Wednesday evening at 7 p.m. If you're over on the YouTube, go to the community tab and you will see the link to get you to the Wednesday night. Okay? All right? And if you're in the Fast Tracks, don't worry. You'll get an email, and in that email will have your exclusive link to get to the show on Wednesday night so that you can bring all your questions and join us so that I can dig in, and we will dig into it all, because I can tell you right now, the Fast Tracks program, once you start getting to Unit 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, ain't a cakewalk. Don't let anybody tell you that it is. It ain't a cakewalk. If you get these right. Now, here's the good news. For those that are in the Fast Tracks program, these questions are probably a lot harder than you're going to get on an exam. So don't stress it. They're difficult. But those that are in it, that's the reason why I wanted to shift to this exclusive weekly session for my Fast Track students and the people in the second tier, because I wanted to be able to personally give you the dedicated time like I would if I was tutoring somebody. And there's no better way to do it than to reward you by being a Fast Tracks member and a subscriber on our YouTube channel at the second level and higher, than to have these weekly chats with you and answer your questions and dissecting it down so that you really do understand it. That's the least I can do for you taking care of me and helping be a member of our program. I appreciate you all. Okay? All right. So if you donated tonight, then you will be put in, doesn't matter what you donate. If you donated tonight using the super chat, then your name will go into the drawing. And if we select you, you will get our new Electrical Code Academy mini screwdrivers. Okay, we'll send you one. Okay, so again, we're going to do that each week. Okay, so it doesn't matter whether you donate $1 or whatever the minimum is. but you're going to go into the drawing. Okay. All right. But they are available if you want to buy them and help contribute over on the website. Just go to masterthenec.com, scroll to the bottom. You will see them. If you want one, let us know, donate, and we will get it out to you. Allow 4 weeks for delivery. It's not going to take that long, but allow for it anyway. I appreciate all of you. Thank you for all of your support and all your donations and all your participation and all the purchases of our programs. We really do appreciate it. You are what make it happen. So thank you, folks. Till next time, stay safe. God bless. You've been listening to Electrician Live with your host, Paul